Good evening, friends. Get prepared, strap in for another episode of your favorite podcast. This is Woodworking is Bullshit. I'm your host, Paul Jasper, scientist by day, woodworker by night. And of course, I got my boy in the chair across from me, fine furniture maker and content creator, Eric Curtis.
Tengo el gato en mis pantalones, motherfuckers.
What is the cat in my pants, did you say?
Don't worry about it. That's for the after show.
Oh, wow. Okay, sorry. I blanked on the intro there, Eric.
You did too.
It's just like, it just stopped. I only slept 5 hours last night from jet lag. Anyway, today we have what is a recurring series of ours. I know you guys love it. And you might remember episodes about the Shakers or an episode on Nakashima. And today we have our third installment of what we call the Master Series, where we feature the giants of our beloved craft. And today's episode is about Wharton Esherick. Now, if you don't know that name, well, you're going to know it after today. Now, Wharton died in the 70s. And in fact, I believe all his children are also dead. So we couldn't have them on. But we had the next best thing, which is we got you, because we love you, we got you the executive director of the Wharton Esherick Museum, Julie Siglin. Julie, thank you for coming on the show.
Absolutely.
And
to be fair, public access also got me, so
we don't have that kind of budget, you know. Paul, you forgot to mention that she's one of the baddest bitches this side of the Mississippi.
I do not.
That was on the pre-call.
Okay.
And then you didn't say it.
I just met Julie I just met Julie 5 minutes ago, Eric, and I will not be referring to her as such, but you can because you guys are fucking tight, thick as thieves. So Julie is the executive director of the Wharton Esherick Museum. She knows so much about his life and legacy, and we will be relying on her heavily to guide our discussion today, which will take place in 2 parts because everyone knows I love structure. The first part of today,
it's a slut for structure. That's our t-shirt for this episode.
I feel like I'm introducing like a talk.
Yeah,
the first part of today's lecture will be about his life and history and introducing you to the person he was. No, absolutely. Like we have to understand who this giant was as a person, as an artist. How did he become who he became? And then that will lead us to a series of questions that Eric and I have mischiefs.
No, you nailed it. You got it, Avery.
exactly right.
Wait, can you help me with that?
Nope. Absolutely not.
Okay.
Yep.
We devised.
We mischievously.
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 That's it. Thank you.
Jesus Christ.
I couldn't do it. That we mischievously devised prior to the episode to ask Julie, and we did not tell her these questions, but we think that these questions will bridge the gap between who this giant was and things that we often grapple with or think about today as makers. So we will see how Julie answers those questions off the
Maybe
cuff.
she'll answer them mischievously.
Or mischievously.
Mischievously. I hope it's the latter. Okay, with that, so let's begin with Julie. Would you be so kind as to introduce us and the listeners about this wonderful artist?
Absolutely. So the short answer is that Wharton Esherick was an artist. This was something that was in him, present in him when he was little. His mother wrote in there was an oral history in which he said his mother complained there was never blank paper in their home when Wharton came around. He was one of 7 kids, a twin, and showed interest and talent for the creation of art in many forms from day one. His high school yearbook, he signed, "I think I am an artist." And at the end of his life, and I think it was the last year or two of his life, he had gotten into an argument with the Pennsylvania tax assessor's office. We have these letters, really, his letters were as expressive as his artwork, in which he went to battle with them about whether he was a production furniture maker or was he an artist. And he signed those letters, "I am known as an artist." So out the arc of his life, that was how he identified. He preferred that over woodworker, sculptor, furniture maker, etc. And it was, as I said, in him from the time he was a little kid. He came into the world right before the turn of the century. He was born and lived in and raised in West Philly. His parents were upper middle class. His father worked in merchant banking. His mother gave birth to a lot of kids and probably just spent her time dealing with them. But because of the time and the status in which he entered the world, there was sort of this prescription for his life. He would go to college. He would go
What's
into his
this?
father's
What's the year, Julie?
1887. So he's the path is you go to college, you go into probably your father's business, you marry, you have kids, you behave a certain way, you dress a certain way, and you do what you're supposed to do. Morton did a couple of those things, but not many. He persisted in wanting to study art, and his family thought that was going to result in an unpredictable income, which I know that everybody listening to this podcast knows absolutely nothing about as artists.
Unpredictable
Artists
incomes as an artist and
No.
maker.
Yeah, it's totally alien to you. So he really, though, persisted in that, and he wound up attending a vocational high school where he had some printmaking and some other art instruction, some practical education. And then he got a scholarship to attend PAFA, and he started as a painter. So we have a number of his paintings, and I hope everybody listening, if they haven't already been to his home, will get there for a visit. His paintings they're gorgeous. They're beautiful. He got a scholarship to study at PAFA, so that was very validating for him as an artist. He was taught to paint portraiture and light and landscape. And when you look at his paintings, you see the talent. But what you don't see, if you juxtapose those paintings with the work of other American Impressionist painters, is Wharton Esherick's voice. They just kind of get lost in that style and that medium. When you are introduced to his work, whether it is an abstract sculpture or a functional piece of art, and believe me, I've tried to come up with a better word, but in the 12 years I've been interpreting him, Eshericky is the best I have. His work is held in the collections of more than 20 institutions across the country. And so once you are introduced to his work, when you encounter it somewhere else, you just know it when it's three-dimensional.
You could tell it. You could tell it by looking at it now.
Absolutely. Yeah. People who get to know his work, he had a very, very strong singular artistic voice. It just took him getting to the right material, the right form.
Was it about 2D to 3D?
Yeah, so he enters PAFA on this scholarship. This is 1908 to 1910. True to form, and this is what I love about the guy. I'll go ahead and use the word rebel. I don't love it, but I'll use it.
That's the word I've been thinking about the whole time. You've been saying, like, well, he did most of what he was supposed to do, and then he told everybody else to fuck off.
Yeah.
Like that's his vibe.
He and I think to this day, when people come and experience what he called his autobiography in 3D, his greatest work, which is his studio filled with his artwork, people pick up on his lifestyle and his relationship to nature and his just, I'm doing things my way, almost as much as they pick up on the beauty of his artwork. So he's in this program, and things are looking really validating and bright for his future as an artist. He's studying with some heavy hitters in American Impressionism. Celia Bow is one of his instructors, and he drops out about 2 months before he was going to graduate.
Whoa.
And he wrote about this decision, which I'm sure his parents really loved.
2 months? Dude, suck it up for 2 months.
Some people call it a rebel, and some people call it just being a dick,
Well, here's what he had. So he's in this program, and things are looking bright. He's identifying as an artist. That's the path his life is on. He drops out right before the end. But what he wrote about it really resonated with me. In fact, it was one of the first things I learned about him when I was studying. I was a volunteer before I ever joined the staff, a volunteer docent. And when I read this, I thought, this guy really, I love this guy. He said he felt like he was being taught to paint like his instructors. And he
Yeah.
wanted to learn how to paint like the artist Wharton Esherick. And I have a lot of artist friends in my sphere. I know that's probably shocking, but they all say similar things. You know, it's there's a lot of you that has to go into figuring out your own artistic voice, and he was there. He was done with formal art instruction, right, wrong, or different. And so,
Question:
you know,
How old? You know, like to be able to say, "I don't want my art to look like yours. I want it to look like mine," is to me a very bold and
evolved.
experienced
Yeah,
statement. How
yeah.
old was he when he said that?
He's 23 years
I was
old.
gonna say, like,
Damn!
bold is right.
Yeah,
Experience.
yeah, yeah.
What a
But
stud!
yeah, I mean, yeah. Have you seen a picture of him?
Okay,
Is it?
so can we go from like that era where he drops out,
Mm,
he lives life, he's finding himself, and then like I want to fast forward just for the sake of
mhm.
time to when he discovers three
Yep,
dimensionality, right? So the Alabama trips,
yep.
those types of things. If we could speak to that.
So he starts out trying to sell painting. He's not really having a lot of success with that. He met and married a woman named Letitia Nofer Letty. Letty is really a topic that, as an institution, we are deep into because art history is what it is, and she was really not part of the narrative when the institution was more of a family-run organization. But Letty not only was a textile artist and a talented one herself, she also was hugely influential on Esherick in introducing him to the socially progressive ideas and people that opened doors for him to show his work, to evolve his work, and to collaborate with people. So Letty wanted to study progressive education, and when their first child came around, they went down to Fairhope, Alabama, for a school year. This is 1919, so she could study under this progressive educator. Wharton is painting, he's teaching painting. He's asked to hang a show of his work at the organic school where Letty is studying. But this is a single tax sort of utopian community. There's a lot of creatives and progressives living there. There's no frame shop nearby. So he turns to the readily available material of wood and starts carving representational wooden frames. And right away, it's clear that when people came in to see his work presented in this way, that the frames were actually a little more enticing than the paintings that they
I,
had.
all right, time out. I think about this often
So
about
do I.
Esherick and just about like the progression
Mhm.
of an artist in general. So you have a person who decided that he was going to be an artist, who went to art school, who studied at the time Pafo was like one of the top art
Absolutely.
schools in the country,
Mm.
and dropped out months before graduation because it was like, fuck you, I'm Wharton Esherick, I'm not you. And then he goes and he paints all of these things, and the thing that sells the paintings is the frame that he haphazardly carved, not
Mhm.
the paintings themselves. Like it's this weird thing where you're like, I'm sure he was glad to sell the painting, but also like just a kick in the nards
Mhm.
to just be like, the frame,
Yeah.
really?
And I think, he actively abandoned painting. He
Mm,
continued to sketch. Sketching was a form of documentation for him of daily life, of travel, and it was probably just a compulsion as an artist.
yeah.
But he left painting fully behind. He even
Mm.
destroyed some of the paintings, as
Did
artists
he
are
really?
wont to do. Yeah,
No shit.
yeah.
Hmm.
I think it underlies something I think about him as sort of the big word cloud things. Is his Venn diagram, if you will, is somebody who is a problem solver and is doing it with humor and beauty.
Hmm.
And he had a problem. He didn't have frames for his paintings, so he made them and then realized, oh wow, there's something going on with me in this piece.
So he's a pragmatist on some level,
Absolutely,
right? Because he
yes,
was like,
very
these things
much,
move,
very
so I'm going to
much
do those things instead of the thing that I want to do, or how I feel I'm known.
correct. Yeah.
Hmm.
Man, that's
Interesting.
for a rebel and that's kind of a dick. Uh, that is that's a move that requires a level of humility.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And what's sort of what I'm thinking right now, I'm in the mind of the listener because I don't know a lot about Esherick coming into this. So I think me and a lot of listeners are like, who? And so
Hmm.
what but I did go to the museum and I do know where he wound up eventually
Hmm.
in this I want to give the listeners kind of a preview of coming attractions to help connect the dots. It's like the most insane, curvilinear, organic, like it's kind of growing out of the ground half the time, sculptural, curvilinear forms in furniture and in a house that like it's almost Tolkien-ish in a way.
Yes, I
Sometimes
agree.
I feel
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't
sorry,
have. Finish. Go ahead.
yeah. So my
I
thought
got
is like,
excited. Sorry.
I'm glad I'm capable of exciting you, Eric. Even after all,
Even after all this time, baby.
even after all this time
I
together.
didn't know it was this kind of podcast.
Yeah, well, sometimes it is. So how do we connect the dots between someone who like started from the upper crust of the Philadelphia, going to art school and an impressionist education, and well, holy shit, I love making the frame, all the way to this, curve. Anyway, that's what we have coming and in store, and I'm so interested to see how we connect these dots. Please continue.
So I'm gonna lay down some of that story though, and continuing to just sort of bring you up to what we all understand him to be, or those of you who are getting to know him well. He is considered eventually the leader of the art historical movement of studio furniture. He becomes that figure well past middle age. So there's a takeaway that
Yep.
that you always keep pursuing your own creative output, and try not to be afraid of it, and always
You're
experiment
saying
with
it's
things
never
you
too
didn't.
late.
I am saying that, absolutely. So but there was also, and I think this is another important point that we'll all get across in some way in the conversation, is that he collaborated, and the more we get to know him as the organizational staff, we think of him as the absolute broadest version of that word. So his circle of friends were musicians and writers and people who were heavily involved in trying to change society. He was a modernist. People like to think of him as this arts and crafts sort of lone genius up on the mountain, but he's in there with the likes of Philip Johnson making houses out of glass. He is part of the American modernist movement. We tend to subscribe those romantic qualities. Wood is very organic and natural, and when we're surrounded by it, our haptic senses are all happy. And so you really can put him in this kind of category. But he was a progressive artist and was part of this movement. And one of the things that we are sort of peeling back the layers on with Esherick now is that he worked with other artists to create his works. He's not doing all these dovetails. He's not doing all this stuff. Eventually, yes, he's doing, I don't want to say this the wrong way. Yes, he's his quote about it. This is how I'll land this point. He gave an interview in Craft Horizons magazine. I think it was 1964, but I can't remember the month. And he was asked about this idea of the handmade being this pure, precious thing. It has to be made by hand.
God, and that conversation is still going today.
Still going.
It's still going on. And I am so curious how Esherick would respond to. I mean, he said a couple of things in that interview. One was he would use any tool at disposal, including his teeth, if it would help him get through a piece of work faster, to get to the next idea that was in line in that gray matter. And also that the idea of that preciousness of the handmade was total applesauce, which was his polite code word for bullshit. He said what matters in the handmade object is the head and the heart. And so, I tell that story often to artists because I think that they're, the tools that are available to us now are enticing. And you can, he never formally studied woodworking. He never formally studied architecture. The site is a National Historic Landmark for architecture. So when I think about him and what he realized, it seems to me that by not studying those disciplines, by not starting with the best practices and all the precedent and all the things that you must do when you're starting out, he could just say, okay, I want a desk that is super funky, and you have to open this drawer before you can open this cabinet, and it's just
one of
this
my favorite pieces in the
wacky,
museum.
the Fisher desk.
Yeah.
Or I want to create his garage looks like a big bug that if you startle it, it's just going to fly away. It has a hyperbolic paraboloid roof. And that's a utilitarian space. But he took the time to make something just absolutely amazing and was unbound by all of those sort of ideals of how you're supposed to do.
And there's so many things in like the last 90 seconds of what you just said to digest, including the fact that he never formally studied architecture, but now his house is a nationally recognized architectural landmark.
One of about 25.
Fucking like of all the flexes.
Yeah.
Of all the flexes.
Freaking
But the thing that I want, like, if we could go back a few minutes, the thing that has always stood out to me when we talk about the studio furniture movement, and
Eric, can you define?
I was literally
furniture?
about to apologize to Mary for having to define the studio furniture movement.
Mary, here's to you.
It is this. I mean, you might have a more formal definition than I do, Julie, but to my understanding, the studio furniture movement is a thing that came about in the 20th century that basically defines this idea of making one-off pieces of furniture, not for a replication, not for mass manufacturing, but you have an idea and you execute the idea, sometimes in speculation, sometimes for a client. And it is, I don't know if historically it's the first step toward art, like furniture making being considered an art form. But if we were to take a broader look at art history on the whole, once the thing becomes mechanized and doable by a machine, then that craft tends to be considered an art. And we're talking about mass manufacturing in the late 1800s and the rise of the studio furniture movement in the early 20th century. So that movement is really about making one-off objects as an expression of art, even though it is born out of a craft. And Esherick is really the first to do that. And coming back
really,
to like,
Eric the first, really?
Well,
I suppose I'm not challenging that. I'm just surprised.
I think probably the true answer is that there were, before mechanization, there's people. That's what people are making furniture in studios all over the place. But they're making things that are covering up the evidence of the maker. They're covering up joins. They're aligning the style with whatever was popular of the day. They're not making things that are an artwork that you can sit on or eat off of. And the GI Bill enabled a lot of returning soldiers to go into to study things that make them feel better. And art's one of them. And so you get some people kind of gelling this idea of making furniture as a beautiful object that serves a function. There was probably rather a big disparate network of artists who were doing that. Esherick gets the visibility. I think Instagram is as much of a tool for a furniture maker today as a hand plane. He doesn't have any of that. So when he participates in the 1940 World's Fair with an architect, George Howe, and furnishes his modernist home booth in the World's Fair called Pennsylvania Hill House, overnight a ton of people are introduced to Esherick's work, and that's when people, and it's incredible. So people are looking at it and saying, okay, this guy knows something about this, and that's sort of when he gets tapped as kind of the leader of it. He then went on to be present at a lot of the seminal events that further defined it. So the Asilomar conference for the American Craft Council that happened in, that was 60 something. I forget what that was.
Well,
question.
So
wait, Eric, before question, like we kind of left off with, I learned to paint. I wanted to do my own thing. I made the frame, and it turns out the frame was very compelling to me. And now we're like, he's some big shot studio furniture movement guy.
1940.
What came between?
Years
between
that?
How did he transition from I make frames to I make furniture?
There was another human who was really important in that gap that you're identifying, Paul. And that's underlying this idea that artists aren't always working alone, and working with other artists does not detract from your work. So he had met a guy named John Schmidt. John had been an orphan in Hungary and had gone into an apprenticeship for cabinet making. So he's making traditional cabinet, very fine. Everything is very square and perfect, and it's elaborately decorated. It's not the kind of studio furniture that we're talking about, but he's very skilled at it. And John immigrated to the U.S. to live near a family member who was here. It happened to be about a mile from Esherick's studio. So he's coming back from his Alabama trip where he's had this sort of revelatory experience with wood, and he's interested in it. And actually, John Schmidt's shop in his barn was one of his first maker spaces when he was playing with wood more. So John continued to work with and for Esherick for a long time. There are pieces out there where the contribution was considered high enough to have a JS next to the WE.
All right. So sorry if I'm connecting the dots, Julie. He started making on his own, but then he started thinking, I need someone who's more skilled in the craft to help me realize my ideas.
Yeah. I'm not sure, Paul, unless AI's here, robots are here, maybe the time machine's not that far behind. When we get that, I know who I'm talking to, and he's going to have to be very patient because I have so many questions for Wharton Esherick. But one of them is, were you thinking about furniture before John kind of came into your life?
See.
And I
so
think
we don't.
probably the answer is yes. I can tell you that he was buying antique furniture and carving into it. An important thing I sort of skipped over is that he had gotten into woodblock printmaking.
Okay.
We have about 300 of the wood blocks that we house and care for at WEM. And this is how books were illustrated in the day. This is how marketing happened, before halftone printing technology enabled photographs to be printed in newsprint. So he had success artistically as a printmaker, but that's also the medium of wood. So he's doing that. And then when he gets into furniture, he buys antique chests or whatever, and he would elaborately carve this sort of narrative decoration. And when he first gets into furniture, some of the early pieces have surface decoration.
And can we pause for a brief second there, because we have talked on this podcast time and time again about the myth of the furniture maker, and like you only work on commission and you only make like a handful of pieces a year and that's how you pay your bills. From the genesis of this movement, of the studio furniture movement, you have a man who is taking on a production work, right? Like, I mean, he's carving them by hand, but then he's printing all of these prints, all of these books, all of these things in his studio. He had a print in later years, a giant press. So he's printing all of these things. Like, this is how he's paying the bills. And then the furniture that comes along, those are like, they're just sprinkled on top. Like, he's finding ways to make money that aren't furniture. And then the ability to design an interesting object comes along every now and again.
Oh, that's interesting, Eric. That's
and
very
he had
helpful.
Clients who would actively, when he was involved in a big project that prevented him from creating lots of saleable things while he was working on something, would buy editions of prints from him so that they could hand him money.
Yeah.
And these were, the client relationship is I think a fascinating aspect of Esherick's. He struggled, like a lot of artists, to price his work, and the more people loved it, he wanted to just give it to you. I have an Eric Curtis box that was given to me because I loved it.
Eric,
but
that's just love, man.
Yeah, I mean, love is where it's at for handmade things.
100%,
especially with your friends. So I went to art school. That sucked. I wanted to find my own voice. I did paint really well. I started making frames, and then I got into woodblock printing, and then I met someone who knew woodworking better than me, but he could help me realize my ideas. But I dabbled in it on the side while I was making my woodblocks to pay the bills. Is that my understanding correct?
We're in the ballpark. Yes.
So I feel like his correct me if I'm wrong on this, but this is my emotional interpretation of his career. When you go to the museum, you go to his home, you see his life's work. You look back on whatever he was, 80 something when he died.
80.
Or
sorry, just sorry, it was 83rd birthday.
Okay. You look back on that, and there's a through line, but it's also abject chaos. Right? Like, it is just fucking everything everywhere all at once, if I could steal that phrase. I feel like his career is mirrored by the visual output of the museum, of his home, where like he knew like design, asking questions, making interesting objects, 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional, was the thing that he was meant to do on this planet. and however the fuck he could figure out to
Mhm.
maintain enough of an income to continue to do that was what he was going to do. So the through line is just like making shit.
Yes.
And sometimes it's wood blocks, sometimes it's
I love
commissioned
it.
furniture.
I love it.
Sometimes it's architectural millwork
Mhm.
in
I love it.
massive staircases and fireplaces for the Curtis house or the Bach house, right?
And sometimes it's making things that he needed.
Sure.
He needed a bench to sit on. He needed, a counter to cook on.
Okay, so you two, you two are so close to the Wharton Esherick story. I'm more in the view of the listener. You talk about his house, like we all know that his house exists and it's a museum. Can you like be explicit about that? So
Yes.
his house, and Julie, you could do 10 times better than me, but I'll start you off. His house that he did almost everything himself. It's like a passion. It seems like a passion project of his. His ultimate passion project is like to fashion the place you live is one of the most interesting things I've ever seen in my life. And now it's a museum. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And where can you tell? Like, I don't think this is common knowledge. You guys are too close to this. Tell us.
I know. I've been thinking about this whole episode. Like, we're just fucking. We're talking
Yeah,
about deep cut Esherick shit,
yeah,
just like
it's like-
referencing things.
And no one.
Sorry, I got
knows-
excited. Okay.
Oh my god, you're totally clipping. Take it easy. Like I don't think the listeners even understand. So there's a museum that was
Yeah.
his house. Julie, can you tell us a little more about that if people
Yeah,
would like to
yeah.
visit this?
Yes, absolutely. So him and his wife had moved out of the city after being married for a year. This is 1913 when they moved to Paoli, where or Malvern rather, where the museum is located. So this is roughly 20 miles outside of Philadelphia, very close to Valley Forge Park, the big national park. So they had a vision for their life. They were total hippies. They wanted to have this pastoral, close to earth, idyllic life. They were going to live out in the country. They're going to grow their food. They were city kids. They were learning how to do that as they went.
I see.
She made clothes. They were nudists, so probably not a whole lot of them. There's a great story about his daughter running around without clothes, and somebody came and was scandalized and said something, and so the daughter went inside and came back out with a hat on. They were they were living. If you fast forwarded, they probably would have been living on a commune. Just
Is this like the 40s, 1940s?
No, this is
1930s?
1913 when they moved out to.
Oh,
to the
even
mountainside.
earlier. Okay.
Yeah. They were a very atypical family.
Okay, so they bought this house in the country.
Well, they bought an old 1800s farmhouse. The museum now sits on a 12-acre parcel. At the time, they only owned the lower half of it, if you will. And when Esherick begins woodworking in earnest, and the tools and materials processes require space, he then started to build the studio. So what is now the museum? We actually have several buildings on the campus. The main part of the museum it's effectively an historic house museum, though we don't treat it as such. He built, started as his studio. It evolved over 40 years. It became his home. He put 2 additions on it, the last one being in 1966.
Did he actually build the building itself?
He did. He had
wow.
a stonemason and two laborers, probably some other people in the mix.
Wow.
When you come to visit, one of the first things that you encounter when you enter the building are these charming coat pegs in the sort of little vestibule that are representative of each person who helped him realize his most famous work, which is the studio. He called it his autobiography in 3 dimensions. And it's John Schmidt holding a saw with visible saw teeth. It's the bird that sang to them. It's the stonemason getting ready to lay a stone just where it needs to go. And then Esherick's coat peg is a little bigger and it's up higher, but that's okay because it's his house. But yes, so I mentioned it's a National Historic Landmark for architecture. And of the 5 buildings on the upper campus, only 1 involved an architect. A pretty notable architect. It was Lucan and Anting helped him build his second studio. But
a couple of big ones.
So when you come for a visit, you experience several of the buildings and go through. We do not. The founders were Esherick's family, and they achieved that by living on the property. They renovated one of the buildings, his later studio, into their home. They gave the tours, they mowed the grass, they cared for it. They kept it free from board members who wanted to do weird things and sell the collection. And, they really gave it they handed their lives over to doing it as unpaid and untrained museum professionals. But, so when you come, you experience those two buildings, and we never put anything between you and the work. You go in, Esherick built the buildings and all the furnishings. It's a
You
critical
walk
massive.
up the staircases,
You
right?
walk up the spiral staircase.
Like made
Yeah.
by him by hand. That is,
Yes.
I know this is a limited time offer. That probably can't stay that way forever due to erosion of,
Well,
right?
yeah, my first two thoughts when I was offered the director role at this institution was, oh yay, oh shit, that staircase. Because it's very scary to be responsible for that. But what it really needs is targeted temperature and humidity. Like everything else Esherick did, it is extremely well built. So as long as you can get over your fear of like open tread spiral stair with very minimal handrails, you're good to go.
So just for a moment, to me, I can see this 50, 100 years from now. This is a time limited offer. Like nothing lasts forever. And the fact that it's in a shape that we can experience it literally walking up it personally is an amazing time to be alive, is how I see it. So I felt this sense of awe when I visited the museum, that I was actually in the space. I was standing on the pieces of wood that were carved by this passionate, compelling individual who had such an artistic direction in his life. So, I mean, the fact that that's still a possibility at the museum is incredible to me.
Shout out to my preservation director, Andy Gustine.
Big Amy, that's what we call her in the hood.
Andy.
Big Andy.
You could call me.
That's what we call her in the hood. I'm not sure anymore.
Okay.
Hold on. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
In this has, I don't want to idealize Esherick like too heavily and make him out to be a saint, right? No. So what you mentioned is his children ran the museum after his death. Ruth, correct?
Yeah, his middle daughter Ruth.
Okay, so he had 3 children.
And 3 children.
His middle daughter took over the property, lived on the property, ran the museum. You mentioned earlier in the episode that his wife Letty was not really a part of the pic. Like she's overlooked and she did her own things. I don't know anything personally about the children's relationship to Letty or how they viewed their father later on. Like he was a very human figure. At some point, he and Letty split, and this was very abnormal for whatever it was, like 1920, 1930.
Yeah, they never formally divorced because of that, but they lived separate lives. Yeah.
Okay, so like what you have, at least from an ignorant standpoint, you have a child who is or children who might have this kind of tension in how they view their father, of like incredible portfolio, incredible life, like story to be told, but like, was he a good dad?
People love to talk about Esherick's personality, his love life, his marriage. And I think as a staff, particularly as a staff who overlapped with his literal children and his son-in-law, we have a pretty sharp perspective, I'll say, but I'll also say that human beings are what they are. And that I think as a society, we tend to take artists, creatives, celebrities, whatever, we put them in this other box that makes them, all their quirks and their negative personality traits are cute and they're interesting, all that stuff. He woke up some days grumpy and he acted like a total poo head. And he was a person who lived a life.
Yeah.
I think he was a person who lived a life that elevated, obviously, beauty, obviously the act of making and what creativity and bringing that outlet into your life does to a person, which I think makes us humble and interesting and maybe a little kinder. But I also think he was just there's a letter he wrote referring to his children as nuisances. I mean,
Okay. Okay. Well, Julie.
yeah,
So I feel like we know this. I don't
yeah,
mean about Esherick per se, but when you're that devoted to something,
yes.
anything, it doesn't mean you're a great dad or a great partner. I mean,
No,
that's
in
called
fact, it can be the
balance, right?
opposite.
In fact, it's usually the opposite, right? The more devoted you are to a singular drive, the less you have time to balance the other parts of life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it
I
totally
mentioned
makes
that
sense.
we talk a lot about Letty these days because Letty, when their marriage unraveled, she took the two older kids, the two daughters, and went to live and work at a repertory theater company that's still active today, the Hedgerow Theater. And Esherick stayed behind with his youngest son, Peter. They moved into the studio at that time to rent the farmhouse they had and have extra income. But I think Letty in the institution's storyline when it was still the family, and we thought a lot about this. We use the analogy of a telescope, that the closer you are to something, the harder it is to see it broadly
Mm,
contextual. It's not the
good point.
family's fault. You just romanticize what you know.
Sure.
But according to the narrative that was shaped by the family, Letty like just disappears. But this is the women listening to this will probably understand what I'm getting at right away here, that art history tends to do that. So
Yeah.
Letty cleaned his home, cooked his meals, cared for his children, did all these
Yeah.
things that enabled
Birthed his
him
children.
Yeah.
to walk up to that studio every day and be a maniac making things out of wood. So
Yeah.
it's not it wasn't him or her, it was both of them.
Well,
Okay.
that's why I wanted to ask the question, though, because whatever medium our listeners are working with, and I think it's majority wood, but certainly they're like, we've got ceramicists, we've got painters, we've got illustrators, etc. There is that tendency to romanticize the production at the cost of the family or
Yes.
the self.
Absolutely.
And I think there are also a not insignificant component of our listenership who would be like, well, I would never fucking do that. That's why I'm going to keep this a hobby. And you mentioned compulsions earlier, and like, could he stop himself from doing X? And I'm not trying to make an excuse out of it, but that's an interesting human tension in there of you have this wife, you have 3 children, and also you can't not do the thing.
Yeah.
And how does all of that resolve? It's a part of the thing that we don't really talk about in the the broader studio furniture movement.
What it takes to be successful in this and what you have to give up.
Yeah.
I point out often that he lived in the studio as a home for 24 years before he installed the first sort of considered kitchen. This is just like time, and it is a small, unusually shaped building. So there were, and physicality factored into it, but I think what he also he liked boiled ham. I mean, the guy was not a gourmand. There's his cookbooks are the McCall's cookbook, the Over 50 cookbook, and the Pecan cookbook. So
Dude, who's got time to eat when you're making art?
Well, that's the point. That's the point I'm making, Paul. That I think, Esherick was a person who woke up in the morning with an idea in his head or something to get back to that he was working on that just overtook everything else.
Yeah. And that's a story we've heard many times in artistic and
you hear that,
geniuses.
friends? If you want to be successful as a furniture maker, you can only eat boiled ham. That's all there.
Okay. So the one thing again, you guys are so close. You guys are looking through the telescope of Wharton Esherick, and me, I'm kind of on the outside. It's like, so we've established that his home was made and it reflects his aesthetic. It's one of his greatest achievements and things that he's ever made is his home, which is now a museum, and you can go visit. It's in Pennsylvania. And I would like to talk about, because it's an audio podcast, it's hard to understand why we are having him as the master series. Like, we haven't really explained to you why his art is so provocative. And so I would like to challenge each of you. I didn't prepare you for this. I just came up with this off the cuff.
Bring it, Paul.
I want the two of you to give me adjective soup about what his work looks like. Why are we having him on the Master Series?
I have an answer that I've ruminated over for years and I keep coming back to, and I think once people are introduced to the work, they get what I'm talking about. I sound a little bit nuts when I start talking about it, but
Please.
there is a sense of movement imbued in Esherick's work. And for visitors who are coming to us without any interest or background in woodworking at all, they've never held a tool and they've never done anything. You kind of tell the story of, you think of the material of wood, you think of a tree in the forest. It doesn't move, it doesn't sway. It doesn't have fluidity. It's not a fragile material. And Esherick gets a hold of this and turns it into something that you literally, I mentioned the building that feels like if you startled it, it will fly away. When you hit the edges of his desks and furniture, often, they're very rounded off and they follow these curvilinear lines that are really friendly to the human form and considerate of not only the human form, but how people move through a room. His tables were kidney shaped. And if you sit at one of his tables, what you find is you're not turning your head fully to one side or the other to talk to the person next to you, but there is just this beautiful sort of bubble happening here. I need to get better at talking about it, but there's a plaster form that dates back to his PAFA days up in the bedroom space of the museum, of a woman wearing a sort of diaphanous dress with her arm up in a dance movement. And I will point to that and then point to one of his library ladders, which is a piece of furniture that moves you up a couple of feet so you can get something off his shelf. But you can make a visual immediate connection between those two. It has this gorgeous hand-like column with a twist on the top and then this sinewy curved steps. There is just, he puts a sensibility into this material that I have never seen another woodworker do.
Oh, that was such a good answer. Sensual and sinewy is, I changed my answer from the beginning of the podcast.
Okay.
That's our t-shirt. That's our t-shirt for this episode.
Right. What are some other adjectives? I would say curvilinear, organic.
I mean, listen, we can categorize it all day long. Like he was not the first to do what he did. But the way that I describe his studio to people who have never been and don't know Esherick or studio furniture movement is just like, if you were to walk into the Mad Hatter's house on acid, that's kind of what it feels like. It's just overwhelming with the amount of nonsense. And I say nonsense in like a positive way. You know what I mean? Like, it's a playful nonsense. It's everything moves, and everything moves maybe towards something else or loops back on itself in some way. And there's a animation to everything that he does. That is, I mean, Paul, we talked about this on the last episode where like, if something is straight lined and rectilinear, when you observe it, you feel as though you can take in all of the information in a snapshot, right? Like it's a two-dimensional thing that's been extruded into 3 dimensions. Whereas I think part of the reason that I really resonated with Esherick's work early on and like latched onto it is because it doesn't matter where you stand in his studio or in front of a piece of his work. There is always a reason to like run your hand or at minimum your eyeball around the thing to another location. And that like, that's that sensuality, that's really interesting.
I think there's also another quality to it that people don't necessarily immediately recognize, but once you point it out, they understand. His designs were extremely friendly to the human body again, but also how we interact with furniture. So there's a cabinet owned by in private ownership that I get to interact with that it's about shoulder height to me. It's this gorgeous demi-lune cabinet up against a wall. And when you open it, there's no applied hardware, so you have to just figure out what to do with it. Which it's toggle switch, you open it. And when you open a cabinet like that and you hold the door out, your fingers, try this if you have a tall cabinet, your fingers are going to hold it, your index and your middle finger at the end of the cabinet at the top with 2 fingers. And that's how you're going to hold it, or some version of that. And there is a little groove in the top of both of these cabinet doors for your fingers to go. It just, there is something familial, comforting, immediate, and just
Anthropomorphic.
Sure. Mischievous.
Mischievous.
Oh, I'm not going near that word.
Well, it does strike me. Esherick did consider the human body a lot and how we interact with the objects. And another person who considers the human body quite a lot is William T. Burkle, the sponsor of this week's video. if you've never been held and caressed by our Lord and Savior William Teresa Burkle at WCB Woodworking, you should head to 390 Pike Road in Huntington Valley, Pennsylvania. Because let me tell you some shit about what's happening right now. When's this episode going to come out? He's going to love this ad read. It's going to be great.
When's this episode coming out? I don't know, but
he's going to double our rate after this one.
But you offered free caresses from him.
Yeah. You
better give him a heads up.
He is a masculine man, but oddly soft to the touch. On May 23rd, which is definitely in time for this episode, they're having Mafel Day. So make sure you get over there from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. and learn any and all things about Mafel. There's going to be expert insights, hands-on demos, and lunch will be provided. And let me tell you something, friends. I have been over there for demos where lunch is provided. You will eat your weight in cheeseburgers and hot dogs, and I don't know what else you want out of this fucking life. Okay?
Eric, what is Mafel?
It's a flavor of ice cream, I think.
Is it like
Mafel? It's a tree. No, it's a tool company.
Where's Sherry when we need her?
Honest to Christ. Let's see what else is going on. 10% off Zenwu Toolworks in store. 25% off mag switches, and you get a free SawStop upgrade. This is this is a true story. I'm cold reading this information for the first time and just got intrigued by the idea of a free upgrade to my SawStop on any new. I gotta buy a new. Okay, never mind. Fuck this shit. On any new professional cabinet saw. Ends on April 30th. So get your shit over there because that's tomorrow and you won't hear this in time. Anything else you want to add to that, Paul?
Oh no, Eric.
Listen, you gotta give him a little tease sometimes.
Well, if you don't like Mafel, what was it, Mafel flavored ice cream? You could
Mafel flavored ice cream.
You could have the LaMelo flavored ice cream.
You can have a LaMelo flavored ice cream. Yeah. But I mean, listen, I mentioned the strong but considerate touch of Billiam T. Burkle. You know who else has a strong but considerate touch?
Please,
Gorillas. And our dear friends at Gorilla Glue.
Gorillas.
And the glue that they provide.
I see.
I don't know if you know this, but sometimes, much like hide glue, sometimes you boil down gorillas to get Gorilla Glue.
Oh no!
I think that's how that works. I feel good about that information. Don't get me wrong. Gorilla Glue will not feel good about that information, but I do, as Eric Teresa Curtis.
Eric, did you
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Did you just say they made Gorilla Glue?
No. I cannot stress it enough for legal purposes. I did not suggest that Gorilla Glue is made from gorillas. I simply suggested that sometimes gorillas are made into glue, I think. There's no way to know.
And the glasses.
So, Paul, tell us about the yellow glue that they make before they cancel our contract, would you? No, okay, he's toast. He's useless. So let me tell you something about Gorilla Wood Glue. It has less water and more glue and a stronger bond than the other guys. It dries a natural color.
I can't.
Dries a natural color.
Okay, now, why did you have to say that?
I cannot be legally held responsible for the words that come out of my mouth.
Okay, there are two products from Gorilla Glue that we have both received and we are both starting to use, Eric, which is the wood filler and the yellow PVA glue by Gorilla Glue. I have never before receiving that. I hadn't tried the wood glue. I had only tried the polyurethane glue, which you and I agree seems to work excellent
That was
for
fantastic.
veneering and such because there's no water, which makes everything not cup, thankfully. And if the Eric, oh my god, and I am hurting. And if the yellow glue
You're
had,
doing great,
yeah,
buddy.
the yellow glue has less water in it, which very much appeals to me because I often do smalls, which involve thin glue ups, and water makes them cup. So that is why I am interested in checking out Gorilla Glue wood glue.
And where can the folks find Gorilla Glue?
You tell them, please.
That excellent. I would be more than happy to do so. So you can order yours today at gorillatough.com/woodworkingisbs. That's gorillatough.com/woodworkingisbs. And again, I cannot stress this enough. It is a water-based glue, not a gorilla-based glue.
No, oh god, Eric, please don't ever. Like, I was literally crying. I had tears in my eyes. I couldn't even talk. Thank you.
We're doing great.
Okay, back to Wharton Esherick, who did not use gorilla-based glue.
As far as we know.
Who did not boil gorillas.
It was the end of the 20th century or 18th century. You know, they didn't.
Okay.
Nobody knew what was going on.
All right. So I feel like the listeners understand some of the contribution now of Wharton Esherick. They understand that there's a museum they can go visit, and they have some idea about what makes his pieces so special. So Eric, perhaps we can transition to the 3 questions that we prepared for Julie as the director and get her sort of thoughts, and then you and I can add our thoughts.
Love it.
Julie, why do you think Wharton Esherick became more popular after his death than during his life?
Oh, do you think that he's more popular after his death than during his life?
I will answer it this way. One of the things that we as an institution, the Wharton Esherick Museum, has been up to in recent years, particularly as we sort of took over stewardship of the site and his legacy from the family to museum professionals, is trying to appropriately contextualize Wharton Esherick in the art history canon. There are different tools available for those things now. We talked about how Esherick, wasn't getting his work out in the way that people can now, and the same is true of legacy artists. But when it was a family-run institution, when I started there 10 and a half years ago as a staff member, we didn't have a logo. There was no logo whatsoever. There was no visual tool. There was no toolbox that an arts organization would use to get the word out. And that is because the family just wanted people the goal was for everyone to experience the studio in groups of 8 at a time. That was it. And that's a wonderful goal, and it's one I still retain. But back then it was open the doors, let people experience it, and then you're on, it was a bit of a checklist institution. And consequently, scholarship was not robust. The archives were not organized in the way they are now. The collections weren't available for scholarly research in the way that they are now. They hadn't gone out in the world in the way they have now. So I think Wharton got a little bit of a short shrift in what should be his status. And I think he was influenced by artists. That's how it works. The dialogue between no artist has ever not been influenced by another artist. I think that's beautiful and a way to describe how it all happens. And Esherick, I think, believed in that wholly too. And he took inspiration and he put it out there and influence and impact and so forth. But I think, it's a few things. It's visibility. and us getting the word out and then participating in that scholarly exchange. Um, and then I think we're also back to uh I Jackson Pollock bicycling down a country road with a basket full of beer and falling over and just being a disaster. But we watch movies about him and we go to visit his work. There is something that happens posthumously with figures like that, where people want to know more and they want to subscribe more to what their lives were and what their impact were. But if you take that part away and just look at his legacy, I think we're really just getting started with putting him in the conversation in an art historical context.
Interesting. So, sorry, I'm going to do to you what I often do to Eric when he gives me long answers, which is I'm trying to understand the essence of your answer. So, he is more popular after his death than before. Is that true?
I mean, I don't, it's hard to say. Yeah, I think he's more visible.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did the success of the studio furniture movement propel him to higher heights than he did previously before it was a thing?
Certainly.
That's what I was thinking when you asked the question and as you were answering, Julie. Again, I don't want to like over pedestalize him. That's a word I just made up.
Sure.
But like
mischievous.
He is mischievous.
Mischievous.
He did a thing, or at least not to say he did a thing for the first time, but he did a thing in a way that it wasn't traditionally done yet.
Correct.
And it's only, towards the end of his life, and now certainly 50 some odd years after his death, that we kind of have the formal structure of what we consider like furniture history, the furniture studio movement. From him came, the Judy McKees of the world, the Wendell Castles of the world, et cetera, et cetera. And so you look back and you go like, well, where did this start? And then I think the natural start point is Nakashima and Esherick. And it's coincidental that they were 40 minutes away from one another. But like Nakashima had this kind of global reach because his career kept like growing and growing in scale. And Esherick,
as did his work, he produced
more
work.
Sure. And
there's also this idea, I don't mean to cut you off, but there's also this idea of the gatekeepers. And that can be the clients, that can be the curators, the museum directors, there's the gallerists.
Yeah.
They're, that matters. And that can be happenstance, and that can be something that puts somebody's career up here, or let it be known I just gestured up. Or
Julie, how successful was he at the end of his life?
That's a really, Paul, that's a question that we ruminate on a lot. I'll give you a couple of anecdotes and then my own perception. My own perception is that setting out to have the life that he wanted, he was a success. Financially, he made it. He tried to take a second mortgage out towards the end of his life. The bank probably just laughed at that. His family pooled their resources, bought the property, so he wouldn't have to have financial concerns as he was aging. But that's not a story you don't hear now. People doing other things. I like to try to dig into whether he thought he was successful. And the story I tell there's it's twofold. One, at one point, he opted not to attend an event where he was going to be recognized because it required fancy dress, and that was just not of interest to him. But in I don't know what year this was, towards the latter end of his life, when the studio was fully realized, the last edition had come on, etc. He had good friends who were married. And his wedding gift to them was he went and stayed somewhere else and he gave them a night in the studio. So he knew it was good. And I think back to that anecdote I told earlier about signing his yearbook, I think I'm an artist, and then saying I am known as an artist. I think he had that arc of satisfaction, and he understood and felt comfortable with the fact that his work was really good. And I know enough of you artists to know that is such a struggle, and sometimes it's maddening. As somebody who I have taken furniture and woodworking classes with Curtis, with our friend Larissa Huff, with all these amazing craft educators, Rob Spees, and they, despite being such good educators, cannot teach me to make this. I'm not good at it. I never will be good at it. So, there's a settling that you have to do with yourself. And I think that Esherick had that. So I think I would consider him a success for that. I hope that
So
answers that question.
successful in his goal artistically, but perhaps it wasn't realized financially. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question.
That's a good layered answer, by the way.
Yeah.
Next question. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is he preferred, or perhaps came from the art side, and then he had to learn the craft side, or employed, what was his name, John?
Well, he worked with John Schmidt, and then he had apprentices at the end as well, and people throughout.
So they became the crafts people who realized the things they made his vision a reality, and he did too in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
So that brings up this idea of, if you're a maker, are you the artist? Are you the craftsperson? Are you both? And what is the value that comes with being both? Is it equally valuable to be one? Like, let's say let's take let's take three cases. I like to think in terms of like limit cases. The first case is, I'm the artist. I'm the idea person. I have all these ideas churning in my head, and I cannot wait to explore them and express these ideas. I may not know how to do that in terms of the craft, or in terms of the physicality of it, or how to use the tools. That doesn't matter. I have other people who can do that, as long as they help me realize my vision. That's one case. The second case is the middle case, where I am the artist who comes up with the idea, and I am the craftsperson who translates it into something real world. And that is me and Eric, for sure. We are both of those things at the same time. And Eric, and I'm going to let you go, Eric, because I feel like you have a lot to say about this. The craft part informs the art part, and the art part informs the craft part. And there is a bi-directional conversation in your own brain, that I thought it was going to be this, but when I made it, it turned out to be that. And then I had these ideas, which turned the art part back on its head, and that flipped to what I was making. So there's a bidirectionality to being both at the same time. And then there's the third limit case, which is, I just like to work with my hands and make shit. I don't know what to make. I don't have particularly compelling ideas on my own, but I love making things, and I'm happy to work for an artist who has the ideals. So it's like, are you the artist? Are you the artist and the craftsperson, or are you the craftsperson? Can you, using this framework, both of you, can you, Julie, can you tell us where you think Wharton Esherick fits in that framework? And Eric, what's your feeling about that framework for yourself?
Mm-hmm. I'd say all three for Esherick, because again, he needed, one of the things that kept happening when he had clients coming to see his work, and his clients became friends. It's something that is really repeated, and I think a lovely aspect of his personality. But he would have clients over for dinner, and they'd have martini, 2 or 3, sit at the dining room table and fall in love with that dining room table. He would literally, the business of an artist is to sell work, and he would literally sell it out from underneath himself and just then remake it. So, there's a utility to that if you look at it that way. But I guess so he's problem solving again. We're back to that idea that I just sold my dining room table. I need a new one. I'm a maker. I'm going to make it. So there's a practicality, a utility. There's also this desk, and for those of you listening, Eric and I have touched on this a couple times. One of Esherick's seminal pieces is called the Fisher desk. If you just Google Fisher desk extras, you'll find a lot of articles and images of it, and it's incredible. And that's on them. That's not I just need a new dining room table. That is something that is, maybe a once in a lifetime work. and I'll put a little personal spin on all of it and just say, if this is a conversation I have with kids who come to the Esherick studio a lot, and and kids are super honest, cool little creatures if they're not yours. And you can get into a conversation with them about where the origins of things, where does something come from, and they'll tell you about this cool thing that they have in their room, this awesome thing, and you say, okay, well, who made it? And they'll say, well, Target did. And you're like, okay, well, let's talk about where things come from, how they come to be. And I think if there wasn't something beautiful in the world, and then there is, that to me seems, I'm not answering this well.
No,
but
you're not.
I think,
Wait, Julie, wait. So wait. So hold on. So you gave me the answer about he sometimes was the crafts person. I was at a dinner party. I sold the table we were having martinis on. I got to make a new table, so I got to fucking pony up the effort and make a new table. But he's obviously the artist, which is the other extreme, where it's like I come up with the ideas and I didn't know how to make it, because then he used John to make the shit.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming there's a lot of pieces where he did both. He ideated the piece and made it himself.
Yes.
Is that right? So
Yes.
your answer is spot on. He did all three of those.
And sometimes he did those things for a practical reason, and sometimes he did that just to make something beautiful.
I love it.
Hold on,
Eric,
hold on.
Go ahead.
So you're gonna tell her that she answered it terribly, and then mansplain her answer back to her and tell her that she nailed the answer.
Oh, look, my gender happens to be male. Don't do that. My answer happens to be male. She was clearly floundering in a moment, and I just tried to summarize what I was hearing. That is not mansplaining.
I was off the rails. He
Fine,
was
buddy.
right. He was right.
Fine,
I
buddy.
was
I love you.
summarizing.
But I gotta give you the shit.
You are the absolute worst. Can you please now tell us, Eric, how your thoughts about how being the artist or the maker or both informs your process?
All three are valuable stages of a career, and not to say that they like one escalates to the other, but you can inhabit each one of those differently at different moments of your career. And I think what I have learned as a teacher is that overwhelmingly, and this is not true 100% across the board, but overwhelmingly, the easier path is to learn the craft and how to build things, and then learn how to manipulate the things that you build into beautiful objects. So from that perspective, I think the trajectory is craftsperson, designer, craftsperson, artist.
Eric, did Esherick come from the opposite of that?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do. That's why there's a lot of people that I teach.
I agree with you. I think most woodworkers listening to this podcast do exactly what you said. Build the thing, learn how to build the thing, then why you build the thing, and how to conjure emotion with it.
So the hard part about being an artist or a designer is you're working in ideas, and ideas aren't tangible. And if you don't have any anchor point to tie those ideas to, you're just fucking floating in space. You're just like trying things, and you're like, I don't know, maybe blue is better than green. I don't know why, but you have no ability to look at a thing that is real and exists in the world and go like, this succeeds and this doesn't. Why or why not? So you learn how to make things, and then in reality, like even if you're a painter, like you start off as a kid drawing, and then you learn the technique of like how to illustrate a three-dimensional thing in two dimensions, right? So there's technique there to learn. There's craft there to learn. But some people's minds do work in the opposite, where they go like, I just have this fucking fire hose of ideas, and I have to learn how to put that into a tangible reality. And so they're kind of forced to work backwards. And it sounds like from what you've described, that's how Esherick existed in the world of like, I just have ideas on ideas on ideas. And now I've discovered this medium of wood in this three-dimensionality. And now I have to figure out like how to take the ideas that exist in my head and force them into the constraints of the reality that we live in.
And the properties of the material.
And all of the physical constraints
how to make
of the world.
Super weird piece of furniture that functions well.
Yeah. Like the cabinet still has to open and close.
Absolutely.
For me personally, I think the sweet spot in this, I think, is born more out of limitation than ideal, is that 50th percentile, that crossover of the Venn diagram of the maker designer, because I am not good enough of a designer to fully realize the idea until it is in process of being made. And my skill as a craftsman, as a furniture maker, is not I wish I was better, and I've worked in enough cabinet shops to be like kind of the shitty guy on the floor to know that, like, if somebody hands me a plan, it's probably gonna be off an eighth of an inch. Like, it's not, I'm not gonna nail it. So having the ability to have the idea and more fully realize the idea through the process of creating it in tangible space, but then also as a craftsperson have the leeway to be like, well, I fucked that up, so now that's a design opportunity. So, like, I think that's why it's my sweet spot, because I'm not good enough to be on either end of the spectrum.
I fucked that up.
Yeah. So, like, let's see. I guess that doesn't have a head anymore.
All right. So I have a few thoughts about this idea of the artist or the maker or both. I would say learning to become the maker is for me was much easier than learning to become the artist. I always felt like art, designing something beautiful from nothing, seems like Mount Everest to me in comparison to like learning how to cut dovetails, because there's a technique for that. Yeah, it's a process and anyone can follow that. Whereas learning how to make beautiful, sorry, I wasn't
She
looking.
said not me, and as somebody who has taught her in a class can confirm.
Okay. Whereas learning to make beautiful art, it's so vague and nebulous. And we talked about this in the last episode of Elements of Art and Principles of Design. Yes, there is a grammar underlying good design, but it still doesn't quite have the structure of making that, you can just cut here, pair to that line, connect, All right. So that's my first thought, is art is harder than craft for me personally.
We should do an episode on fear in art making.
Yes, please.
Cue it up. Put it on the list, buddy boy.
The second thought is that if you're the ideator of the design and the executor of said design, those inform each other. And I talked about that when I was kind of setting up the question, that while you're making the thing, artistic ideas that you may have had previously shift and morph and change and evolve. So the two are intimately coupled together while you're making it, and they inform each other, which is a brilliant interplay between being the artist and the designer at the same time, or the artist and the maker at the same time. That's a brilliant interplay and tension that informs in both directions. And I think that leads to the ultimate piece that is really capturing the essence of who you are, right? Because you've done both things. You've designed it, you've made it, and while you were making it, you perhaps tweaked the design or remade it. And that's not so easy when it's separate people who may not have, there may be a communication gap. Whereas when you're the one doing it, there's no communication gap. That's my second thought. And my third thought I forgot. So we're gonna
now we're on the same page, buddy boy.
Shit. I hate when I forget ideas. Okay, but I do have our third question for Julie on tap. Julie, this relates to the idea of joy as a design principle. Okay, so I'm sure Julie's well aware, but there's this quote attributed to Wharton Esherick. The listeners probably don't know this, but all of you do. If it's not fun, it's not worth doing. And that speaks to the idea of joy. Should or can or should delight be a philosophical criteria for making things?
That speaks to a man who has sold more than one dining table over a few too many martinis.
So should joy be part of your process? Should joy be part of the motivation for making things? How do you, Julie, interpret that quote?
Yeah. So we use that quote. We put it on a magnet. I think it was probably something Esherick said once, perhaps in a flippant way, but it's charming. And I do think why maybe we can't land on the exact origins of it, but I do think that for me, with what I've come to understand about him and the time I've been thinking and reading and writing and uh, directing my professional energies around him, knowing his family, that he did have fun. And that whether he fucked the thing up and had to start over, or this piece of wood was giving her a hard time, or something was wrong in the day, he was a happy person making things. That was his purpose, and that's what he did. When people come through the museum, we have a lot of different modalities for delivering what we want people to think, feel, and understand about Esherick when they experience. And then we get people, we are drawing from the public. So, we get all kinds of people who come here disinclined, people who like woodworking, people who don't like woodworking, people who like sculpture, people just looking for something to do on a Saturday afternoon. Whatever your life or creative experiences before you come in there, though, I do think that it is really hard to walk through his world, what we kind of position as his creative journey, manifest into a built environment, and then to just go on about your day and not give some real deep reflective thought about, gee, I've been thinking about taking that pottery class at the arts center nearby for the last 6 years. Why don't I just do it? Why
So
don't
the word that comes to mind from what you just said is inspiration.
It is inspiration, which is, in my field, in the museum world, we can't say that. That's can't use that word in there stuff, because it's just like, that's what it is. But you need to come up with different ways of packaging that. But you're right, Paul. That's exactly what it is. And I think what's so great about it is that when you come in there, one of my favorite objects, our associate curator and director of interpretation has indulged me and put it on display in the kitchen counter. One of my favorite objects was not made by Esherick. It's a little oven mitt shaped like a chicken, and it's just the cutest thing ever. And I look at it and I think, how did this come into his life? Did he use it all the time? Did he use it with joy? It just, there are papers in the desks and spoons in the drawer, and his clothes are in the dresser. So you come in, and what you feel maybe going into a big box gallery museum with labels full of didactic texts that are sometimes indecipherable, and the curator's thoughts, and people can feel intimidated going into some cultural institutions. But you come into Wharton's house and you really do feel like he's just not home. And I think if you can give yourself a minute to just hang out in there and think about it, it causes you to think about how you spend your time and what the value of the objects around you are. So you drink your coffee out of a mug made by somebody in the morning. That
I do every day.
Every fucking day you do.
Every day. I do exactly
coffee.
that.
Even if it's Monday morning and it sucks, and you make your coffee and you're like, I don't want a Monday, I want to go back to bed. But you get that mug out, and there is this is going to sound really lofty, but there is a human connection that is something we really need to elevate in the world. And
oh, Julie,
yeah, I think that's where I would say the joy comes from.
Paul's heart just started flattering a little bit.
I know. I'm like, that was a soliloquy. That was so beautiful. Your answer. I'm like dying here. Eric, you know who made your mugs?
Oh yeah, for
Follow
sure.
that.
No, I can't. No, it's true. Like I agree. Fuck everything you said before that. I agree with the last thing you just said. Which is the need for human connection and understanding and appreciation of objects. I don't know if it's through humans or because of humans. Like, I don't want to say that the human and the object are like one is better than the other and yada yada, but like having objects that are made by yourself, by people you know, by people you love and care about, like that is a thing that brings me a huge amount of joy
Mm-hmm.
and makes me smile on like a shitty, cold, rainy Monday,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And I think craft and the realm of craft, functional objects, handmade objects, takes it all a step further. When you look at art, there's a whole bunch of people who think art should just be pretty. And then there are people who swim in the art world maybe a little more deeply, and they want to be challenged by it. They want to understand what people are saying and look at it as human expression, and right up on the edge of your comfort level. There's something about craft though that is, I mean, the materials are very familiar to us, and there is a capability that you see and appreciate even if you don't fully understand what it took to make the desk we're sitting at, or how long it took, or what the goddamn glue up was like. So there's a capability and there's a care that is just this really, really human to human piece of it. So yeah, I mean, we call it a joyful handcrafted home, and I think it's a palpable thing when you're in there.
I don't know how else to end this fucking episode. I feel like that's the banger.
That's it. That's how we end. I posted in my stories today a handmade mug by a friend of mine, Kara, and I made a latte, and I accomplished some latte art that I've been working on in her beautiful mug. And I just felt like, I want to post this. And Kara, I just posted to my stories, and Kara was like, oh, thanks for posting. And then I talked to another potter friend of mine shortly thereafter, and I made her a pottery bench many years ago, 6-7 years ago. We made a big pottery bench, and she contacted me about that. But that's all to say that the human connection, and that is this podcast. That's why Eric and I keep coming back to it, Julie, to meet people like you, to talk about art and the feel good that comes with craft. You're right. It's so familiar. It does give the warm and fuzzies. And you used the word lofty earlier, and I don't like that. Is maybe perhaps a defensive perception, how maybe we're perceived as lofty because we talk about craft in this elevated way, but it really is the ability to feel connected to humans. And you hit the nail on the head when you said we need it now more than ever, and I couldn't agree more, right? And I think a lot of people who listen to this podcast, and I know so many of them have told me this, they yell at the podcast, they like yell in their shop at us as if we because they want to be part of this conversation. And I am so thankful that I am part of this conversation too. All of us want that piece of connection. So I really think you ended on such a great note, and we're going to end it on that. In the after show, what we will talk about, and I have more questions for Julie, is, and I'm going to give you a preview of coming attractions, is if Wharton were still alive, what would you ask him? All right, don't answer. That's for the after show.
Okay.
What would we talk about? Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, friends.
This was illuminating.
Great, Julie. Thank you.
This is a true pleasure.
It was a really, really good.
Julie,
thank you.
You were an absolute legend.
I told you she's a bad bitch, man.
I would not call her that, but you can. Julie, thank you. Really, we appreciate you so much. You enabled this amazing discussion.
It was fun, and Wharton would approve.
Right. Wharton approved.
Wharton approved on that. We'll see you in the after show. If you want the after show, subscribe to our Patreon. We'll see you there.
Okay, bye.
Bye.